So welcome to part two. So now we're going to be working on the seat. In part one, you saw we had to reshape the foam on the back. We cut 3 inches out of this framework, dropped the seat down so that it's the same height as the original seats in '68. We were able to get the foam on, get the foam wrapped, obviously pad the foam out to fit the seat covering or the back seat covering. But I think we did a pretty good job. I mean, in the final part of part one, we were able to stretch it down and it fit fairly well. Now, there were some wrinkles in the corners, but remember, those wrinkles are part of the stitching process, right? As they stitch around a corner, there's always going to be wrinkles. Also, too, I haven't pulled it taut, right? So we're going to be able to pull that and stretch it. And then thirdly, it's just going to be use. I mean, the car is going to sit in the sun, the sun's going to heat up the material, it's going to stretch, and eventually it'll work its way in. But again, like I said, the part I'm going to talk about here is don't let perfect be the enemy of good, right? I mean, if it looks really good, then that's good. But if it's got one wrinkle in it, you can chase that all day. And it's the same thing with the hood, and the other videos I'm working on. I was sitting there working on the hood, trying to flatten the hood out, and then I realized, am I letting perfection be the enemy of good, right? And there's got to be a point in time where you stop, or you'll just chase every little scratch forever, and you'll never get anything done. So, like I said, let's start working on the seat. As you can see, there's a lot of empty material here. Again, back in the '60s, these seats were wide, and the newer seats, if I take this off, this is the new part of the seat, this is the MKX seat, you can see they're a lot narrow and they're heavily bolstered, right? So, I don't know if that's a comment on society, but basically, let's start shaving this down and start adding some foam until this fits properly. Okay, simple enough. Turn the seat, cut the bolsters off. Literally just took, 1.5 inches, flatten the bolsters down, right? Because remember, the seats from the '60s were just flat. They didn't have any bolstering. And if I leave the bolstering in, it's not going to fit right. The seat's going to be up here. I can't tie it down very well, so I'm trying to bring it down. So now if I take the seat cover and place it on, the next thing we're going to notice, and again, like I said, initial fitting, so I'm just going to pull it back a little bit. So, obviously we're starting to get near the foam, right, because there's the foam. But the big problem is on the sides, right, I can feel. So there's about 2 inches on either side. We have to bring this out 2 inches on both sides. But as we can see, as we get down through here, we're at the foam. So it narrows at this point, but I've got 2 inches to come out. So I'm going to build 2 inches out on both sides. And that way then this will start to fit a little better. The other problem I'm going to have is that this has been stitched, obviously, with the hole here. This is where the original seat, you would put this on, then you would put the back on, and then there's a couple of pins holding the back on. So I'm going to have to actually cut this because I don't have that here. I'm not going to be able to take this back part off. So I'm going to have to just take a razor in there, cut the stitches to separate these two pieces, and that way one piece goes on the inside and the other piece goes on the outside, and then I can pull it back. On this side, it's the same thing. I'm going to have to cut some of these stitching so that this can actually pull forward or pull back around the mechanism. But as I said, right, this is going to take some massaging to get done. So next step is to cut the stitching, add a couple inches on both sides, and we'll go from there. All right, see you in a few minutes. Now remember I told you I went out and bought some foam, obviously. So here is it's about 3/4 of an inch. It's a fairly dense foam, so this would be great for the sides, right, because I just need to fill. The other thing I bought is they also sell these remnants. And what's great about these remnants is they're actually different thicknesses, throughout the entire piece. So this gives you the ability, if you need to fill in just a little bit, you gotta, the foam is nice and thin. Here it's a little thicker, so you can maybe create transitions or changing the elevation from a thick piece to a thin piece, but using the same piece of foam. Remember, as I said, if you do this like Frankenstein and you just piece hundreds of little pieces together, you will see that through the fabric. I mean, the fabric will show it. Now, the fiber fill will help you there, but basically, unless you put the largest pieces of foam you can, you will see those ripples through the fabric. Anyways, so I'm just going to start using these pieces, cutting them off, and I'll start sticking them on. So I like to cut my pieces a little oversized, and the reason is because I can now take this piece, glue it on. I'll be able to then trim this as I want, and I can cut it and shave it down the way I need to. But if I had too small of a piece, then as I said, you start becoming Frankenstein. If this becomes too short, then you're gluing a piece here, and where the two pieces of foam come together, you will see that through the fabric. So again, get a piece longer than you need, glue it on, and then you can trim it. But like I said, I need to build up 2 inches, so I'm going to probably need 2 of these panels on this side and another panel on that side. And again, you get the appropriate adhesive, as I showed you earlier. This is for foam, right? So it sprays on actually kind of nice and light. You can see it's almost like a fiber fill, you know, like when you fill fiberglass. And same thing here, so you just spray it on. Now, I'm being a little rambunctious because I'm videoing, but usually I'd have gloves on because this stuff, it does stick to skin as well, like every other adhesive in the world. But the great part about it is that just by spraying it on like that, and I place it in, it already starts becoming tacky. I mean, that's why I love this adhesive, right? You know, so if I just hold this in place for 60 seconds, you know, this piece will be set. And then I just gotta spray this again, and I'm gonna wrap another piece around here. And then once I have the second piece, I can start trimming the transition, because like I said, you know, this obviously is no good. Like, this has got to become a smooth transition. And we know from this point on, the seat fits nicely, so I'll have to start using the knife to cut this and trim it out. But as I said before, you know, again, rinse and repeat. So, first pass. 2 pieces of foam now attached to the sides, right? So again, they're glued in. And again, as I said, it holds really well. So I highly recommend using the appropriate sprays. Just got to trim this piece off here again. I'm going to put it on. So that's going to be the key. Don't build it up and then put it on and realize you put on too much, right? It looked like I needed about 2 inches on either side, but that means nothing, right? It's not until you start putting the piece on. I've already relieved the ends by cutting them, so I'll be able to now move the fabric further down, which will pull it in tighter, and that'll give me a little bit of better indication as to whether or not I need to come out further on the foam. So let's give that a shot. Okay, just like the other seat, and I was expecting this, but wanted to show you how you discover it. Basically, the seat needs to go further back. I mean, this really has to drive back. Now, what's stopping it from going back? It's not the foam, because I've got lots of material here to move it back. What's stopping it is down in the corners here, the way these have been stitched all the way to the bottom. The other seats used to fold way under, right? Because they were very simple, right? A metal frame with some foam on it and wrapped around. In these seats, it won't work anymore because they're more robust. I have mechanisms under here for the power seats. So the only really way I'm going to be able to get this to go back is I'm going to have to actually cut the stitching down the sides and the front. Remember, this is going to wrap anyways. I'm going to be pulling the framework, so this will all be connected. But I need this to go further back, and this is now stopping it. So next step, I'm going to cut the threads here to relieve these hard rolled edges so that it can actually then start to move back on the seat, and then we continue the fitting. So as I said, this isn't easy. Trying to take a modern seat, something made in the 2000s, in this case a 2008 or 2010, you've got the front seats out of that car and you're trying to manipulate the foam in order to fit upholstery that was designed for a car in the 60s. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, modern seats are narrow and heavily bolstered. Older seats were broad and, you know, wide. And trying to get the foam to that point was a difficult challenge. I mean, it's probably been about 2.5 or 2.5 hours, I'd say. And what I've been doing is quite literally building the foam, adding foam onto it. Again, trying to keep the foam as solid as possible. Remember that Frankenstein thing I said before. Any of these seams are going to show up in the final result, and that's why you need something like a fiber fill, which is going to isolate that seam a little bit. But basically what I've done is I have taken the seats, I've added all of the foam around it. I've created this bit of a fiber foam, or the fiber fill here. And then I'm also going to take fiber fill for the entire surface as well. And this way what will happen is it will also not only cover the original fiber fill, but it'll start to give me this little bit of a bolster here. And that, the reason behind that is because the way the seats are, is that, you know, they need to be filled a little bit. So this gives me that filling. Also, I have my deep cuts because remember on the back of the upholstery where they've stitched the different colors together, it's actually quite a lot of material and you got to hide that someplace. So you got to create these valleys where that is going to go, because if you don't create those valleys, then you're going to see that it's going to translate. So so it has been a couple of 2-3 hours, and I'm in a position now where I am ready to fit the upholstery on, and let's take a look at what it looks like. Okay, so by cutting the front back, that allowed me to push this back even further. So now this is going into that groove I had cut. Remember, there's a lot of material back here because you've got the blue, you've got this dark blue being stitched together underneath. This has also got foam in it to give it the texture, so again, that adds thickness, so it's got to go someplace. There's got to be a place for that to go. Now, if I take the seat and I start to pull it out like I will be when this is stretched out, you can start seeing the seat is actually starting to take shape. I want this edge to be under the seat. Obviously, I don't want it to be on top, because then, when you're driving, that'll be against your leg. So this way here now, this is folded down. This is in the back. Seat's actually fitting really well into the corners. And as I said before, though, as you can see, this doesn't go far enough back because this is a larger seat. So I'm going to be taking some of the material that I have extra for this, which I'm also going to use for the headrest, which I'm going to show you how to do the headrest. But this is going to allow me then to stitch some extra material on, which will then cover up here. And then when the top comes down, the two blues match, and then you don't see it, just like I did on the other seat. So I think I'm pretty good at this position as far as the foam. It fits the fabric, and as I said, as soon as I start to stretch the fabric out, it'll straighten out. So that's going to be it for the seat. I've done all the work I need to do on the seat. I still need to weld in that steel rod, as I mentioned before. It's going to weld in from the, here, let me show you. It's going to weld in from the parts, from the metal here to here, and it's going to run down along the front. And that way there, what it's going to do is going to allow that side piece to wrap around underneath, and then I can attach them both on both sides. I can attach it to the front here as well. And in the back, it'll attach to that bar I put in there as too. So, like I said, coming along really well. I'm going to weld these in, and then I'm going to turn our attention to the headrest. So that'll be a separate video, because that one's requiring a little bit of stitching on the machine, because I literally have to take this apart, use the existing pieces as a template, cut those pieces out, and then re-stitch those new pieces together to do the same thing this is done here. So, like I said, that'll be a different video. Right now I'm just going to weld in some rod, and I'm done. Okay, so I crunched it a little bit. Basically, I simply welded that 3/16 inch steel rod to the back of the frame. Now this doesn't pivot. It pivots from this point up, so this isn't going to pivot, don't worry. So this is part of the main seat that moves back and forth, obviously. But what I've done is I've welded it to the back, and I've welded it to the front. And what that gives me now is this metal bar, which I can then manipulate and move. But when the seat is on and the sides come down, I can wrap it around, and then either I can hog ring it or glue it. This you don't really see because it's down really low into the seat area, and you've got the carpeting and everything there. But I am going to clean this up and paint it, because, it would look like that anyways, right? You'd see the black track, and you're going to see the black track here as well. But I'll clean this up, paint it all up. Any fabric or any metal that shows will just be painted black anyways, which is normal. So that's one side. I'm going to do the other side, and as I said, that'll be it for the seat, because then the seat, it screws onto it clips onto the front. It'll now clip onto these side bars. It clips onto the back. The back has already got the framing in it. So really after that, I just got to work on the headrest, and let me weld the other side, paint these up, and I'll show you the end result.